Let me tell you something about what's actually happening with Social Security in 2026, because there's a lot of confusion out there, and confusion is expensive. The Social Security Administration confirmed a 2.8% cost of living adjustment for 75 million Americans. That translates to roughly $56 more each month for the average retiree. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like $200, and you're right to be skeptical. Here's where it gets interesting. Democratic senators introduced the Social Security Emergency Inflation Relief Act, proposing an additional $200 monthly from January through June 2026. The bill covers Social Security recipients, SSI beneficiaries, veterans, railroad retirees, essentially everyone on fixed income. But, and this is critical, it's just a proposal. It hasn't passed the Senate, hasn't passed the House, and hasn't been signed into law. The confirmed increase hits your account in January. The proposed $200 still sitting in committee, understanding the difference between what's certain and what's merely possible. That's not just important for Social Security. That's how you navigate life without getting blindsided. Now let me explain what's actually going on here, and why understanding the distinction matters more than you might think. The Social Security Administration didn't pull this number out of thin air. Every October, they calculate the cost of living adjustment based on something called the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. That's a mouthful, so everyone just calls it the CPIW. They compare the third quarter of this year to the third quarter of last year, and whatever inflation number comes out determines what 75 million Americans receive. It's automatic, it's mechanical, it's the law. And for 2026, that calculation produced a 2.8% increase. For the average retiree pulling in about $2,015 a month, that works out to roughly $56 additional dollars. For married couples, it's about $88 more per month. Not spectacular, but it's real money that's definitely coming. Here's where it gets more interesting. The 2.8% is actually one of the smaller adjustments we've seen recently. In 2023, beneficiaries got 8.7% because inflation was running wild. In 2024, it dropped to 3.2%. Last year, 2.5%. Now we're at 2.8, which suggests inflation is still elevated but not spiraling out of control the way it was a couple years back. The Social Security Administration announced this on October 24th, and they were very clear about the timeline. If you're getting regular Social Security retirement benefits, the increase shows up in your January payment. If you're receiving supplemental security income, you actually get it slightly earlier, December 31st, because January 1st is a federal holiday, and they always move payments up when that happens. No application required, no forms to fill out. The system just automatically adjusts your payment upward. Now, before you start spending that extra $56, let me tell you about something that's going to take a bite out of it. Medicare Part B premiums. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced that the standard monthly premium for Medicare Part B is jumping from $185 to $202.90. That's an increase of almost $18 per month, or nearly 10%. The Part B deductible is also rising from $257 to $283. For most people on Medicare, that Part B premium gets deducted automatically from their Social Security check. So if you're getting $56 more from the COLA but paying $18 more for Medicare, your net increase is only about $38. That's still better than nothing, but it's a lot less exciting than the headline number suggests. This is the perpetual frustration for retirees. Every time Social Security goes up, healthcare costs seem to rise right along with it, sometimes faster. The Medicare premium increase would have been even higher, incidentally. The Trump administration took action to reduce what Medicare pays for something called skin substitutes, which had become a huge cost driver. Without that intervention, Part B premiums would have gone up another $11 per month. So there was some cost control happening behind the scenes, but it's still a significant increase that's going to affect millions of people's budgets. Now let's talk about this $200 proposal, because this is where things get complicated and where a lot of confusion is spreading. In late November 2025, a group of Democratic senators and representatives introduced something called the Social Security Emergency Inflation Relief Act. The lead sponsors include Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Ron Wyden, Congressman John Larson, and Congressman Stephen Horsford. The bill proposes to give an additional $200 per month to every Social Security beneficiary, SSI recipient, railroad retirement beneficiary, and veteran receiving disability compensation or pension benefits. The payments would run from January through June 2026, 6 months of additional support totaling $1,200 per person. That's real money. That would be genuinely helpful for millions of people trying to make ends meet on fixed incomes. The sponsors argue that the 2.8% COLA simply isn't enough to keep pace with what seniors are actually experiencing. They point to rising grocery costs, higher health care expenses, increased utility bills, and the general squeeze that inflation puts on people living on fixed incomes. And they're not wrong about the squeeze. Studies show that seniors spend a disproportionate amount of their income on health care compared to younger people. Housing costs keep climbing. Energy costs fluctuate. When you're living on $2,000 a month, and your expenses keep creeping upward, even small increases feel significant. The bill's supporters say that a $200 monthly boost would prevent people from having to choose between medications and groceries, between heating their homes and paying other bills. Those aren't hypothetical choices for a lot of Americans. They're very real decisions being made every single month. But here's the absolutely critical point that I need you to understand. This bill has not passed. It's been introduced, it's been proposed, it has co-sponsors, but it hasn't been voted on by the full Senate, it hasn't been voted on by the House of Representatives, and it certainly hasn't been signed into law by the President. The legislative process in this country is slow and unpredictable. Bills get introduced all the time. Most of them never make it to a vote. Some get amended so heavily they barely resemble the original proposal. Some die in committee. Some pass one chamber but fail in the other. Until a bill clears both houses of Congress and gets the President's signature, it's just a proposal. Nothing more, nothing less. The political reality here is worth examining. Democrats control neither the Senate nor the House right now. Republicans have majorities in both chambers. This is a Democratic bill without significant Republican support that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean it's impossible for it to pass, but it does mean the path forward is unclear and probably difficult. You'd need either significant Republican buy-in or some kind of broader legislative package where this gets included as part of a larger deal. Neither of those scenarios seems particularly likely at the moment, though stranger things have happened in Washington. There's also the question of cost. Paying an additional $200 per month to 75 million Americans for 6 months isn't cheap. We're talking about $90 billion, give or take. That money has to come from somewhere. The bill includes appropriation language, which means it specifies how it would be funded, but that doesn't make the political challenge any easier. In an environment where deficit reduction is a major talking point for many lawmakers, finding $90 billion for a new spending program is going to face serious headwinds. I'm not saying the bill is bad policy. I'm not saying seniors don't need the help. I'm saying you need to understand what's real and what's aspirational. The $56 COLA increase is real. It's happening. It's already baked into the system. The $200 monthly payment is aspirational. It's what some lawmakers would like to happen, but whether it actually happens is far from certain. Making financial decisions based on money that might arrive is different from making decisions based on money that's definitely arriving. One is prudent planning, the other is wishful thinking. Let me tell you what this reminds me of. It reminds me of the discussions around the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. For years, there were bills introduced to repeal those provisions, which reduced Social Security benefits for people who also receive pensions from jobs that didn't pay into Social Security. Year after year, the bills were introduced. Year after year, advocates pushed for passage. Year after year, nothing happened. Until finally, in 2024, it actually passed and President Biden signed it into law. So persistence can work, public pressure can work. But it took decades, and for most of those decades, people couldn't count on it happening. The other thing to understand is that even if this bill passes, which I'm skeptical about but not ruling out entirely, there will be implementation challenges. The Social Security Administration would need to identify all eligible recipients, verify their status, coordinate with the Railroad Retirement Board and the Department of Veterans Affairs for beneficiaries in those systems, and get the payments processed and distributed. Government agencies don't move at the speed of the private sector. There are procedures, regulations, systems that need updating. Even if the bill passed tomorrow, which it won't, there's no guarantee the first payment would arrive in January. It might be February. It might be March. The timeline matters when you're budgeting month to month. Here's what I'd suggest. Budget based on the guaranteed increase. That $56 minus whatever your Medicare premium increase is, that's what you can count on. Plan your expenses around that number. If the $200 payment comes through, wonderful. That's bonus money you can use to catch up on bills, build a small emergency fund, or cover expenses you've been putting off. But don't commit to new recurring expenses based on money that hasn't been approved yet. That's just basic financial prudence. One more thing worth noting about the cost of living adjustment itself. There's been ongoing debate about whether the CPIW is even the right measure to use. The CPIW tracks spending patterns for urban wage earners and clerical workers, which means it's based on working-age people, not retirees. Seniors spend differently. They spend more on health care, more on housing, less on transportation, less on clothing. There's another index called the CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, which some advocates argue would more accurately reflect retirees' actual expenses. Studies suggest that if Social Security used the CPIE instead of the CPIW, the annual adjustments would be slightly higher most years. Not dramatically higher, but consistently a bit more. Of course, there's also something called the chained CPI, which would produce lower adjustments. The political debate around which index to use has been going on for years without resolution. The larger point is that the system we have isn't perfect. The 2.8% COLA helps, but it doesn't solve the fundamental challenge facing retirees, which is that Social Security was never designed to be the sole source of retirement income. It was designed as one leg of a three-legged stool: Social Security, private pensions, and personal savings. For a lot of Americans, that stool now has only one leg because private pensions have largely disappeared and personal savings rates have been inadequate. When Social Security is carrying almost all your weight, even a decent COLA doesn't feel like enough because the base benefit often isn't sufficient to cover modern living expenses. So what should you actually do with all this information? First, verify your own numbers. Log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov and check what your actual benefit will be in January. Don't rely on averages. Get your specific number. Second, review your Medicare coverage during the open enrollment period and make sure you're in the right plan for your needs. Sometimes switching plans can save you money even when premiums are rising across the board. Third, track your expenses carefully for a few months and see where your money's actually going. You might find opportunities to trim costs that don't significantly impact your quality of life. Fourth, if you're eligible for programs like SNAP, the low-income subsidy for Medicare Part D, or state assistance programs, apply for them. Pride shouldn't stop you from accessing benefits you've earned and qualify for. And fifth, stay informed about what's happening in Congress, but don't make irreversible financial decisions based on proposed legislation. The confirmed reality is this: you're getting 2.8% more in 2026, which translates to about $56 for the average retiree, starting in January. Medicare Part B is going up about $18 per month. Your net increase will be in the neighborhood of $38. That's what's certain. Everything else is speculation and hope. Plan accordingly. Plan.